On September 4, 1944, the British 11th Armoured Division entered Antwerp, capturing the docks with Belgian assistance. It was 85 days, however, before the first Allied cargo ship reached the docks on November 28. Some 80,000 soldiers of the German 15th Army slipped across the Scheldt estuary and escaped towards Germany along the Beveland Peninsula. At the mid of September, Antwerp was liberated and reputed to be undamaged but unable for any kind of shipment because the German troops were still in the bunkers of the mouth of the Scheldt. But another reasons would come after. Since Le Havre was reputed seriously damaged just after its liberation but free, and since its location did not materially shorten the lines of communications, General Lee recommended that it be placed in operations rapidly as possible but with a minimum expenditure for reconstruction. Lee recommended that the major ports' development be confined to Cherbourg, Le Havre, and Antwerp. The port problem underwent continuous study during the month, and on 27 September Comson issued a revised port development directive tailored to the current tactical and logistical situation. The main emphasis was now placed on the development of Antwerp, Le Havre, and Rouen, to receive cargo like Liberty ship. Until Antwerp became available, Cherbourg would be used at maximum capacity. With the opening of Le Havre and Rouen in October, the port situation improved somewhat, making possible the elimination of minor or expensive operations. The Red Ball Express was a famed truck convoy system that supplied Allied forces moving quickly through Europe after breaking out from the D-Day. After the Allied breakout and the race to the Seine River, some 28 Allied divisions needed constant resupply. During offensive operations, each division consumed about 750 tons of supplies per day, totaling about 21,000 tons in all. The only way to deliver them was by truck, shortly giving birth to the Red Ball Express.
But almost immediately, this new momentum by advancing armies puts new strains and demands on the Red Ball Express. Relief drivers are urgently needed, and they are recruited from every outfit on the continent, even infantry units. Each truck is driven around the clock. Drivers fight exhaustion, and accidents increase. By August 29th, the Red Ball Express reaches peak performance. Almost 6,000 trucks delivered 12,000 tons of supplies to the forward areas. Columns of German prisoners marching away from battle can see the trucks that have hastened their defeat. While the Red Ball Express convoys work without let-up, a crucial meeting of Allied commanders takes place at Chartres to determine disposition of supplies. General Eisenhower wants the major portion to go to General Hodges' First Army. Patton protests that his main force has been halted at the Meuse River for 2 days because of insufficient supplies. He wants more fuel so his tanks can break for the German border. He persuades Eisenhower to increase his allotments. His reason is widely quoted. "My men can eat their belts, but my tanks gotta have gas." Patton's Third Army thrusts armored columns across the Meuse River, capturing Verdun and Commercy. With astounding speed, they ford the Moselle River near Nancy and Metz.
There was a lot of dissension between Patton and a few high-ranking officers. They had some arguments about him moving too fast and getting into trouble. he would steal supplies off of another general, you know. Convoy of trucks would stop and want to know where such and such an outfit is, and he would tell them, right down the road about 2 miles, turn left, that's his. I would have done the same thing. If a guy couldn't take care of his supplies, that's not our fault. He should have sent people out to guide him in to where he was. That's what we did with Patton.
Regardless of Patton's unorthodox methods, his armies continue to blast German positions and push the enemy back.
After the logistic crisis of October, the Red Ball Express was closed in mid-November and be replaced by other color roads or pipeline like the Seine system or rail. The October crisis issue was, Le Havre would be immediately developed to receive cargo from Liberty ship discharging into Dukes or lighters, and its capacity would be eventually increased to 7,000 tons per day. Rouen was scheduled to discharge 3,000 tons daily from coasters. 10 of the new Phoenixes firstly scheduled to winterize Romanches were to be sent to Le Havre. The most U.S. engineer regiments were sent there. During the German counter-offensive of December 1944, Le Havre played an important role in supporting the hard-pressed U.S. forces. In that month the port dispatched 92 trainloads of ammunition to the forward area. Critically needed rockets were rushed by truck from the port to troops defending a large depot at Liege, and certain types of small arms ammunition were given expedited handling. A major feat during this period was the rehanging of the gates of the Loch Rochemont. This project, participated in by engineer and harborcraft troops, U.S. Navy salvage personnel, and French civilian contractors, opened the inner basins to Liberty ships. Despite adverse weather, obstructions, and limited equipment, the job was finished at the end of November. The first Liberties passed through the lock on the 16th of December. Other important undertakings, completed early in the following year, involved the rehabilitation of the Tancarville Canal for barge traffic up the Seine from Le Havre, and the rehanging of the gates of the Bassin de la Citadelle. The objectives of Antwerp was 40,000 tons per day as the port seemed to be in good state in October. But the resistance of the Germans at the mouth of the Scheldt, the mine gate, the clearance problems, the V1 and V2 offensive attacks, the very cold winter and the offensive of the Bulge have prevented to reach these objectives before end of February. The traffic has really started at the beginning of December. November the 28th, the first ship, and December the 9th, the first tanker. December the 16th, the pipeline was operational, but berths were destroyed few days after. Reception and distribution facilities were also substantially augmented by the development of what was known as the Seine River system, based on Le Havre and, farther up the river, Port Jérôme and a satellite of Rouen, Petit Cren. For the petrol oil lubricant products, the Seine ports have saved the Allied forces of a complete logistics defeat thanks to their installation in a relative good state preserved from the German destructions. August the 31st, Moselle, 3rd U.S. Army of Patton is stopped because of the run out of fuel infantry support after having crossed the Meuse River. September the 20th, at some miles from Arnhem, Colonel Reuben Tucker, commander of the 504th Regiment, berates a British officer, "Your boys are hurting up there at Arnhem. You'd better go. It's only 11 miles. But the British commanders Horrocks, Browning, and others want to wait for more fuel, ammunition, and were forced to halt. The October Crisis or October Pause, the Supreme Commander's decision to halt the advance of the Patton's Third Army, in the last week of September, had stemmed from an untenable logistical situation. Bradley's 12th Army Group alone needed 20,000 tons of supplies per day in order to support a secure offensive for bridgeheads across the Rhine. The expectations for the delivery of supplies during the period 1 to the 15th of October summed up to only 12,000 tons per day. 82 Under optimum conditions, the entire Allied logistical effort could support only 25 divisions on or at the Rhine in October. The scheduled attack by the 7th Army to force a crossing over the Seine south of Metz was now perforce to be abandoned. Plans were immediately made to develop Le Havre's discharged capacity to 5,000 tons per day, 3,000 of which were to be shipped to Port Jerome, via the pipeline. Engineers of the military pipeline service began rehabilitating existing facilities in mid-October, starting with unloading lines and storage at Le Havre, and clearing the pipeline to Port Jerome. Both offloading and storage facilities were found relatively undamaged at Le Havre, where tankers could discharge either into smaller tanker vessels for transshipment to Rouen, or into shore storage, whence bulk coal could either be delivered to Port Jerome through an existing 10-inch pipeline, or shipped out via rail or truck. The pipeline was not placed in operation until December, but Le Havre received its first tanker on the 31st of October, and unloading into storage and decanting began immediately. Facilities at the other two ports were gradually brought into use, and work on the various installations continued until February. Le Havre was also the principal troop debarkation point in the European theatre. The troops were debarked safely in an area submitted to a high level of security with many camps, named the cigarette camps.
I see. We went to Paris with a bunch of guys. I have some pictures in there, in that book there that show. There's the chow line I was telling you about. Get a load of that. How would you like to wait in the chow line like that?
Hitler and the German High Command also understood the significance of the port to the Allies. In early October, Hitler ordered that all V weapons should now target London and Antwerp exclusively. SS General Hans Kemmler received the orders for the bombardment of Antwerp under the codename Anton. On November 10, 1944, American Brigadier General Armstrong had arrived from Paris to take command of the Flying Bomb Command Antwerp X-Force. This consisted of American, British and Polish units of about 22,000 men. New plans had been drawn up for the 3 brigades of artillery to be stationed in a ring outside of the city to form a protective barrier against the flying bombs. During the V-weapon onslaught, over a period of 175 days and nights, the German launching crews fired more than 4,000 V1 and more than 1,700 V2 at Greater Antwerp. Of those, 106 V1 and 107 V2 hit the heart of the city. During that period more than 3,700 civilians were killed and some 6,000 injured in the province of Antwerp. Only about 30% of the V2 launched against Antwerp reached the city. Only about 30% of the V2 seconds launched against Antwerp reached the city. The rockets that were off target kept falling all around the Antwerp area and often very far away from the port area. Several factors come into play for the modest number of V2 seconds Antwerp suffered each day, but the main reasons were the German bottleneck in their alcohol and liquid oxygen supply and the enormous dispersion of the still imperfect weapon. Field Marshal Montgomery had demanded that Antwerp ex-command to try and bring down half of all the V-1 launched at the city. This figure was reached in December, 52%. In January 1945 they reached the 64% mark, and by February 1945 they managed to bring down 72% of all incoming V-1. In December the oil facilities in Antwerp were destroyed. Patton, well supplied with the Seine pipeline operational since the December 1st, and well informed by his intelligence units, has launched the counter-offensive 5 days after the Panzer attack. Montgomery had to delay the counter-offensive on the January 3rd because of preparations tasks. The Bulge attack was also the last offensive of the Luftwaffe. The casualties of Allied aircrafts were very heavy, particularly on the airport not defended by SCR 584. This system was able not only to give the alarm but also a very accurate fire. The most important losses of German aircrafts were due to anti-aerial system like SCR 584.
Anti-aircraft fire was knocking the terror weapons down in hundreds, often before they reached the coastline. Meanwhile, our bombers continued to find them. And as we swept through France and the Low Countries, we first isolated the rocket coast, then captured it. The end of...
Near Antwerp, a microwave early warning radar was able to track the V-2 and to give the predicted launched point to send commando to destroy the V-2 launcher. The capture of Le Havre was vital, for the pole facilities of the Seine to supply the U.S. Army for munitions to defend Antwerp during the Bulge attack. 1 million of 90mm shells were fired by the guns of the SCR 584 anti-aerial system supplied either by air or by Le Havre.
Before the Second World War, one of the great landmarks in Belgium was the 600-year-old Gothic cathedral in the city of Antwerp. Towering over the city, this architectural achievement was a spiritual symbol, linking the inhabitants with a great cultural past. The cathedral, as well as other old buildings, reminded the people of a way of living that had stood the test of time. Another aspect of Antwerp before the war was a forward-looking, energetic spirit. Antwerp built the first skyscraper in Europe, 25 stories high. Selecting the best from the past and the present, the people preferred a mild attitude toward life. They looked with contempt on the fascist ways that had developed in Nazi Germany, a short distance away. Antwerp, since the Middle Ages, had been a trading center. Its port was the greatest on the continent of Europe. The harbor, with its vast machinery capable of handling tremendous volumes of import and export trade, brought Antwerp into close contact with the world outside the city. But one contact became inevitably a clash. A war between great powers threatened the peaceful life of Antwerp. For a few months of 1939, Belgium tried to preserve its neutrality. Then Hitler, choosing Antwerp as one of his first targets, sent his planes swooping over the city, bringing to it death and destruction. Napoleon once said, "Antwerp is a gun pointed at the heart of England." To Adolf Hitler, the capture of Antwerp was a natural step in the plan to conquer England and the rest of the world. Antwerp was taken. For 4 years, the Belgian people existed and suffered under German rule. Finally, the Allies invaded the continent, bringing the hope of liberation to the conquered peoples of Europe. As the invasion proceeded, supplying the forces became an increasingly severe problem. The beaches became a crowded bottleneck of supply. The Allies needed a major harbor to feed the tremendous drive toward Germany. The enemy knew this. They bombed and wrecked Le Havre and all the large ports along the northern coast of France. Deprived of harbors, we found roads were the only answer. Roads became our lifeline, stretching farther and deeper into France. Supplies moved over one-way routes in a 24-hour delivery system now famous as the Red Ball Express. Day and night, the trucks rolled along the roads of France, bringing gasoline, ammunition, and food to frontline depots. The huge Allied force in France had only one small port, Cherbourg, through which supplies might flow. Cherbourg was hundreds of miles from the fighting front. The lines were stretched to the breaking point. We needed a port desperately. Antwerp, Germany's key to the invasion of England, could unlock the door to Germany,